The most important part to any zoo is the animals in the enclosures they call home. Throughout the series, I'll be designing different enclosures for an array of animals, whilst also keeping guest interaction at the forefront of every build. Join me each week as I tackle a new enclosure and idea and try and bring it to life within Planet Zoo. Today I'm building a mountain goat enclosure, and this will feature a lot of rock work because my idea is to include a big mountain at the back of the build with a big walkway that guests can walk over and get a full 360 view of the goats. Here are the stats for the mountain goat. They need a lot of land requirement, not so much climbing requirement, even though my build will feature that because I wanted the different levels for the guests to see the goats. Here is the social structure, and one important thing to take is there should only be one male and up to 19 females in one group. So that's something to bear in mind with this build. To start off with, I wanted to get a feel for where I wanted the mountain to go, so I started by placing the footpath around the enclosure, and the mountain will sort of form around this footpath. This is to give the guests the best possible view. With the footpath in place came the fun part, placing loads and loads and loads of rocks to really make up this mountain that I wanted to build. With this mountain, I also wanted to hide the indoor bit of the enclosure. I didn't really want guests seeing it, also because there is a keeper path down the side there. I also wanted to hide that from guest view. So the left side of this build, there is a lot of high rocks to really cover that space. But under the archway there, in the middle, I sort of build the entrance to the indoor house. But as you can see, the front of the mountain itself isn't a very big space. So I later add an extension to the enclosure to the side just to make it a bit bigger, obviously because the mountain goats have a large land requirement. Here I am adding those rocks, really trying to enclose the space. The little bit that I've put the roof on already is actually a keeper area part of the enclosure, which is the first one I've done in all of these builds. And as you can see, I'm just trying to get all the roof on in areas where I want to place rocks so I can really build up that mountain facade for the enclosure. Now I'm working on the little higher parts of the enclosure that I want the goats to be able to access. So I'm slowly building a little descending staircase for the goats to access and also give guests an even better view of the goats. I trialed this design previously and I was really happy with it. Obviously it involves adding some more walls and really sort of enclosing the space to make it safe. Another thing that really helps is adding like enrichment pieces up there to sort of encourage the goats to go up there and really use all the space because I want them elevated. They are mountain goats at the end of the day. Now comes the part where I decided to extend the enclosure out the side, and as you can see I'm just laying out that sort of extension with the rocks. Like I said, lots of rocks in this build, and I'm just sort of marking out the back wall there, really trying to get an idea for how much more space I'm giving the goats. Because I was still struggling to get an idea of the size of the enclosure, I decided to start putting in the walls I wanted, just so I could really get a feel for how big this enclosure was and really sort of close it off to get the goats in. Here I am adding some windows, making sure they're one-way panels so that the goats have somewhere to hide from the guests because it's a very open enclosure. This was a very fiddly part of the build. As you can see, I have the doorway already laid out, but the fence wouldn't go where I wanted it to. So I decided to switch it round, which was a bit of a faff itself, and then line up the gate again so it lined up with the doorway. Here I am adding the final touches of the rock work. I just wanted to enclose this window just to make it a little bit different from other enclosures and also the rest of the walls around the front of the enclosure. I do also add another footpath that goes up to this window. I've left that footpath sort of open-ended, so if I build another enclosure next door, it can just flow into that. With more rockwork added to the enclosure, it was time to get the goats in and really sort of add the finishing touches to this build. Goat in, time to get the ground texture right. This was a lot of rocks and mountain terrain. Obviously, for a mountain goat, I was trying to clear all the long grass, and there was a lot underneath the rock work itself that I really had to sort of fill in to get the levels right. Once I'd added a lot of rock, it then wanted some more shorter grass, so I added these patches of green, which you can see I'm doing now. Here I am adding the enrichment to the higher ground, just so that the goats will go up there. And I'm really just sort of trying to fill in the space, but not too much, bearing in mind that it's quite an awkward shape enclosure. For the goats to access the two areas, they do have to go through the house, which isn't viewable for guests. The temperature of the enclosure was another important thing for the goats, so I made sure there was some coolers in the enclosure. Here I am adding the final bits to the build, which was the roof to the house, and now I'm just adding some screens with information regarding the mountain goats for guests to see. Here's something a little different that I wouldn't normally incorporate into these builds. I wanted a solar panel on the roof of the mountain goat house because I needed more power, and it seemed like the right place to put it. Also because the rock work was hiding that part of the build. Overall, I'm really happy with this build, and I'm glad that I extended the enclosure out the side there, because looking at that bit at the front, it really wasn't enough for the goats. I'm glad that the mountain has worked out the way I wanted it to, giving guests the best possible view.